We are on the lunch break in the second day of questioning of the undercover police Detective Chief Inspector Mike Dell, who was head of the SDS between 2001 and 2005. He's been asked further questions this morning on his letter of recommendation for commendation for HN81, cover name Dave Hagan, for his infiltration of the Stephen Lawrence Family Justice Campaign. He's been asked about HN60, cover name Dave Evans, who deceived a woman into a sexual relationship. And he's also been asked about HN3, cover name Jason Bishop. There've been a couple of restriction orders, but we'll try and weave our way through them. I'm joined by Emily Apple of Campaign Opposing Police Surveillance and many other things. I mean, like, starting off with the stuff about Dave Hagan. I mean, he's pretty adamant that it was a deserved recommendation. This wasn't just routine. No, but there was good intelligence, high quality intelligence that came in about the Lawrence family, including the fact that they might be that Neville and Doreen Lawrence might be splitting up.
It was so disgusting. I have to say that to start with. Like his whole justification seemed to be there was nothing to report, so therefore that intrusion on a grieving family was okay.
Yep.
And he saw no problem with that whatsoever. And it is just sickening. I mean, but it shows the mentality of these officers so much, and that's what kept coming through. He kept thinking he was being clever, he was being reasonable, and why people couldn't see the logic of this, and that they're just retrospectively applying this criteria to this gross intrusion, and it was just sickening.
Yeah, really gross. He echoed this line we've heard a few times, that a negative is as important as a positive. That he needed to be able to say, he said that, what was a cracking quote, he said that HM1 was contributing to repairing police black community relations because he was able to report on the temperature in the black community, and that was an important thing, because when he got asked, well, how are the black community feeling about the policing at the moment, he would be able to give an answer. And you obviously need to do that on a weekly basis. So it needs to stay there, continuing to get negative information constantly.
I mean, it's just this sort of circular catch-22 logic that, that if you apply would justify spying on anyone because, well, they're not going to do anything. So, that's good. We know they're not going to do anything, so we're going to keep spying on them.
Yeah.
So we keep knowing they're not going to do anything. And it's just circular. And not to be able to kind of go, this was a gross intrusion. This was a gross intrusion on a grieving family campaigning against racism in the police. And the fact that he couldn't see that, couldn't see the institutional racism in what they were doing, speaks volumes.
Yeah, he even said that it wasn't institutional racism, it was institutional incompetence that resulted in the Stephen Lawrence lack of investigation by the police. A nonsense, clearly showing that he's paid no attention to McPherson. Pathetic. He also said, which I thought was particularly offensive, that the only person who needs to apologize to the Lawrence family is Peter Francis.
I mean, bloody hell. I mean, what a thing to say. And we had this a bit yesterday when he was sort of talking about how angry he was about the inquiry, which did come back to a bit today.
He did.
But to blame the person who revealed that this intrusion was happening and his anger at Peter Francis for doing it, I mean, that kind of stunned me, how angry. I mean, I shouldn't be stunned by him, but at this point, but it was such an admission. And he seems to have this thing of, if someone wasn't the direct target of the operation, so the Lawrence family themselves, they weren't targeted themselves, so that's okay. So what Peter Francis said was wrong because they weren't the named targets, as if somehow it makes any difference whatsoever if you're being spied on, whether you're the named target or not. That is an irrelevancy.
Yeah, no, it's a nonsense. He has a similar thing with, I mean, something he came up with yesterday, but he's repeated it a couple of times today, about legal professional privilege, is that, no, you shouldn't go out and specifically go and get it, but once you hear it, you must report it so that it can be quarantined, as if somehow it's like oh look, we've caught it in the air and we've kept it. I mean, it's just such a weird thing. But he's adamant about that, regardless of the legal status of it.
Yeah. He doesn't see a problem with it, and yes, but everything has to be reported. We had a frustrating near question about HN60 with his abuse of legal professional privilege, which hopefully we'll come back to because they couldn't find the right reference. So hopefully they'll come back to that, because that was another interesting one where we didn't go, because there is a question, and I've got it in some of mine with civil cases that are being reported on, and like they want us to trust that none of that information was used. Like, yeah, come off it.
Yeah, absolutely ridiculous, especially when you consider that they're quite happy, particularly in the case of HN81, to have him briefing the Stephen Lawrence review team, the Richard Walton, who was in charge of developing what the police's strategy was to deal with the outcome of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, and they were happy to feed back into that. He said as well that it wouldn't have been, what use would it have been? How would it have been useful to McPherson to know there was an undercover officer? I don't think it would have been.
No, not at all. No. We're investigating institutional racism. And the institutionally racist police are spying on the bereaved family. No, that wouldn't have been relevant at all. No,
insane. We did get onto HN60. There was a restriction order in place. Hopefully it'll be rescinded, but I'm not sure it will. So we can't really kind of talk around it too much. But it related to the questions around HN60 related to the fact that he had a sexual relationship while he was deployed undercover. The person he had that sexual relationship with was not an activist. Now, this has led Mike Dell to be under the impression that there's nothing wrong with it. It's just an affair. He uses terms about informed consent and bodily autonomy when it comes to activists, but he seems to think that the same thing does not apply to members of the public.
It is utterly, I don't understand what's going on in their heads, but especially his, because he, unlike some of them, he appears to be adopting this or attempting to adopt this very moral position that does not stand up to scrutiny. And he kept making kind of references to, if he was a plumber or lying about his job or something like that, and completely failing to take the point. He kept refusing, like we went round and round and round in circles over this, refusing to accept the point that if he was deceiving someone in his undercover identity, because he kept saying, if they're at home and they're off duty, well, like, he wasn't off duty. He was in his cover name, and it is obscene. He kept saying, it wasn't as bad. And I just do not understand.
I think the only the reason why he's doing it, I think, is because he has admitted to knowing that Carlos Saraki had a relationship with a woman who told him what he was told was not an activist, and he didn't chastise him for it. So
he's got an out there. He thinks that's his out, and it's not an out.
It's not an out, but he has to be then consistent with it.
Yeah.
But it is an insane hill to die on. This idea, but particularly because he has digested the language around informed consent and bodily autonomy. And then not to, it's so, then he said, the only person who was really a victim in this was his wife. And of course I had a duty of care to her, but apart from that, there was no problem.
Yeah.
It was just an affair, deeply offensive. And he kept at it for quite a while.
He kept at it for ages and ages and ages. And he was asked the misogynistic language. Is that part of?
Yeah, so that's not covered by restriction order. We can talk about that. So there was So Dave Evans, in his witness statement, said that after a conversation with Dines, he decided he didn't want some spurned ex-lover chasing him around the country after he was deployed. Now, what was pointed out was the misogyny of this, because it was in relation to Dines, so it was obviously in reference to Helen Steele. And the idea that Helen Steele was a spurned ex-lover, when in fact she was someone who was deeply concerned about the well-being of the man who had told her that he loved her so, for those of you who followed the evidence on Friday, love bombed her so intensely for so long, and that she was genuinely concerned. She wasn't a spurned lover looking to get revenge. She was someone worried about somebody who she cared about deeply, who wasn't real, as it turned out. He did not appear to get this, and for someone who's pretending to be intelligent a lot of the time, he pretends to be very stupid for that section. I don't believe he's that thick. I don't believe he's that clever either.
No, there's a middle ground, isn't there? Yeah, and it just went round and round and round in circles. And he was trying to be really, really pedantic about it. About, oh, well, I don't know that HN60 was talking about Dines necessarily, as if that made a difference. And like Sarah Hemingway put it, well, actually, it doesn't really matter. Like if we were talking, like it's obviously clear in that section that he was talking about him and Helen. But, she even put it to him that it doesn't matter. It's about that language over someone who cares about someone they thought was their lover, who had been through, them disappearing, who wanted to find out whether they were all right, and that use of language itself is deeply misogynistic. And he just wouldn't accept it. It felt like forever that we were going round and round in circles with him just trying to pick up incredibly nonsensical, pedantic points to get round answering the question, because I think HN60 is one of the officers he wanted to go was perfect.
Yes.
And he can't do that now.
He's really struggled because he keeps saying the majority of the officers were good. There was 2 miscreants, and when you start adding together all the officers on his watch who did something wrong,
you're not left with any.
Right. He's just got the closed officers, which he can pretend were amazing because,
Well, because he hasn't got us pesky lot.
Right, exactly.
Going, here's all the evidence.
Yeah, quite.
Which is, again, the problem with the closed officers that we've got again and again and again. Because if we knew the identity of those closed officers, I can guarantee there would be evidence that contradicts what they are saying.
100%.
And we know that. We know with every single one of us who were court participants, if we hadn't kept records, if we hadn't provided evidence, their evidence would be quite strong because they would just go on those officers' words.
Yep. And that is almost certainly what's happening in the closed section of the inquiry. There's a remind watchers that we only are able to follow the open section of the inquiry. We have no idea how many hearings have taken place in closed. It may be a great deal more than have happened in open. Certainly, we get the impression that during those months of the year when the inquiry is not sitting, that are outside of the sort of traditional holiday times, that in fact there are closed hearings taking place. It's a huge area. There will be 2 reports at the end of the inquiry. One covering the closed, which nobody will get to see apart from the Home Secretary, and the open one, which will be highly limited to just the things that you've been able to follow. After the questions about Dave Evans had finished, and we started looking at HN3, Jason Bishop. It was established that he got too close to criminality, that he was over-enthusiastic.
He was over-enthusiastic, yeah. He was very keen on criminality.
Yes, very keen, yeah. But then we went into a closed section because there were certain questions in that closed section which were subject to reporting restriction order. Now, in the past, I've reported on those sections, being mindful of the restriction order, kind of dancing around it and kind of not getting too close to it. However, given the overzealous nature of the inquiry legal team and very specific threats I have had to my ability to cover the inquiry, due to the cumulative effect of my breaches in the past, I chose not to report on it. Very frustrating. However, I am joined with Emily Apple, who was spied on by HN3 Jason Bishop, and the reporting restriction order is yours, yes. So I think we're on safe ground. If you'd like to talk around it, I'm sure you wouldn't want to break it because that's but I won't contribute too much. What do you make of what was said in that section?
So it was very interesting. I think there's still specific questions that need to be asked about what he was authorized to do. So in terms of what was in open evidence that came under the restriction order today, there's stuff around his involvement in actions against CSCI, organised World's Largest Arms Fair, the organisers' offices that he was involved in. There are questions about that actually still need to be asked in terms of what was authorised. But his view was that yes, HN3 was very enthusiastic, that he had to kept being pulled back, and that he was very understanding of the fact that he had to be pulled back. And again, it was very, very nonsensical because what he kept saying was that they'd got the information that they needed, that he would have to be pulled back, and then they would have to send in S10 evidential undercover, which, as far as I'm aware, they did not do, because we weren't prosecuted or anything. But he seemed to have missed the point that, well, there'd have still been disclosure issues about how they got to that point. But HN3 was still involved in all the conspiracies. Like he seems to have forgotten that if I had just been involved in the things that HN3 was involved in, and there hadn't been an undercover that was just collecting intelligence and it had been evidential, the fact that I hadn't gone to do a certain thing wouldn't have made any difference to the fact that I was involved in that conspiracy. And we're seeing that at the moment. If we bring things back to the present, when we're seeing people spending years in prison for organising a Zoom meeting, for booking Airbnbs, for driving to places. People are getting substantial prison sentences for being less involved in a conspiracy than he was. And they're forgetting that the actual bit where you go and take an action isn't the only bit that is illegal or should be considered as part of that operation. They're just kind of like circumnavigating the whole way our conspiracy and incitement laws work.
Yeah, I mean, this really comes back to that statement that Dell made yesterday about how when the authorizations to commit crime were given to the undercover officers, that maybe they didn't understand it was just protocol, that it wasn't actually a license to break the law, and that any law breaking would have to be like tested on its merits in front of a court, and that there's no immunity from prosecution taking place, and the whole concept's a nonsense.
It is complete nonsense, and his lines kept changing over, well, he could be involved in that, but he couldn't be involved in the next stage or something. But those lines kept changing, and it really wasn't very clear. And he kind of started off by saying, well, he wouldn't have been involved in criminal damage, but we know that he was involved in criminal damage. HN3 says it in his statement that he was authorized to go and throw paint at an office. So that did happen. And yes, it's these like constantly shifting lines of where things are convenient for them. And he hasn't got any answers for it, because they don't have any answers for it, because they've just made up all the rules as they went along. And we had it this morning with whatever he said about the RIP authorizations, that they were creative or they had to stretch things. And this whole notion that, like, I'm an anarchist, it's fine, but if you believe in the sort of structure of like law and order as we're supposed to have in this country, that is supposed to be absolute. They're not supposed to be lines that are blurred, that are stretched, that, oh, well, we can justify doing this in this circumstances. That's not how the law is supposed to work. And that's what I find like deeply offensive about this sort of whole thing and these whole operations against us, because we were supposedly engaged in unlawful activities, or some of us were. Some, they obviously spied on a lot of people who didn't do anything at all. But for those of us that were doing stuff, it's just kind of like, you can't even, like, you don't pick and choose which laws you obey. It's just nonsensical.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say, if anybody's concerned we're doing an outraged liberal act, if some outraged liberals could please pay attention to the inquiry. There's a lot for you to get outraged about, but you're not here, so we have to like make these arguments
and it's
as
also
anarchists.
and it's also, I think you can make those arguments as anarchists to show how ridiculous the whole system is.
Absolutely.
That's part of the reason why I'm an anarchist, is because there isn't any consistency, whether that's in government, whether that's in the police, wherever it is. But the inquiry is laying that bare. It's those opportunities to lay that bare of how ridiculous the whole concept of our legal system is and how it is enforced.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, no, I mean, it's been the case throughout, hasn't it? I'm reminded of HM1 with his driving Jeff Shepherd to go and commit criminal damage, and he was like, "Oh, it's just the driver," as if that somehow that didn't make him liable in any way for the stuff that
I'm looking forward to a court case, and I'm just going to go, "Oh, wow," They all said it was all right, so I
Yeah.
presumed it was.
I had an authorization.
Yeah.
I had an authorization. Who the authorization usually come from? Well, it doesn't matter. It was authorized. Yeah, it's somewhat ridiculous. We will be going back in fairly soon. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this morning's hearings?
No, I mean, just that there was just so much this morning. I mean, there was a lot. Like if you haven't watched it, no how much watched it, there is a lot of talking around things, but buried around the talking around things. There is so much there, and I think that's going to be the case this afternoon. You know, like it's so clear that he thinks he's got this intellectual justification that just does not stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah, very much, absolutely. Just one comment from Mr. Abney. Seeing how Mike Dell managed people, I'm unsurprised the police settle 100% of their employment tribunal claims.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't talk about HN77 either.
Oh my God, yes, HN77. Let's quickly do that. So, in HN77, Jackie Anderson, she was deployed into an area which supposedly wasn't producing enough intelligence.
Oh, critical mass.
I mean, who'd have thought that like a bunch of cyclists were not going to be giving him that much information? And he said that he wanted to redeploy her to go to Scotland, cover the G8 protests in 2005, and have Jason Bishop pulled out.
Yeah.
But she wasn't up for doing it, so she went to the police fed to get them to accuse him of like trying to kick her out of her job, and she was going to bring a sex discrimination case.
Yeah. And you can bet there's a hell of a lot more to that story than he's letting on. You know, like even like she was the only woman at the time, and being forced out. And I think there is something interesting about the way, like if you look, for example, at how they justify the intelligence of some of the male officers when they're producing no intelligence at all that is of any value, but somehow with Jackie Anderson it's suddenly like really problematic. Like, I'm not complaining about the fact that they're calling out one of these fuckers for doing fuck all, but I think there is a real, there is something noticeable that happens to the woman on the unit, and there is so much there that he's not going to tell us. Yeah,
there's a huge amount there.
We don't have her to.
Very frustratingly, we the only female officer we've had giving evidence in inquiry was Sandra back in the very first phase of Tranche 1. None of the women officers have appeared, which is very frustrating because we have had no sort of thing from them. I mean, you say she did fuck all. She did a lot of massaging.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's no evidence. I don't remember her at all. She spent a lot of time at the Radical Dairy, which is a Scotted social centre in Stoke Newington. I spent a lot of time there because it was around the corner from me, and I don't remember her at all. But yeah, she was known as Massage Jackie, and utterly gross.
Yeah, I mean, I have no memory of it. I wasn't hanging around those circles anyway, but yeah. I think that's something we probably should wrap up to go back in. We'll do another reaction in the break time at the end of the day. I'll get a few people in. I did mention on Twitter there's a lot of students in the public gallery today. I did attempt to see if any of them would come on a video, but then that was before the chair walked in. When the chair walked in, they all stood up, and I realised they're not our kind of people. I don't want them.
They might just not know yet. They might just not know they're our kind of people yet.
Maybe. We'll see. Thanks for joining us. See you all